3 years flew by in the blink of an eye. As days became weeks and weeks became months. During this time, Arthur focused on learning more about his beast will and magic in general as Virion explained to him the intricacies of the magic system in this world. The 4 basic elements were water, fire, wind, and earth. And their higher forms were ice, gravity, lightning, and sound. Only those who had a deep knowledge of the basic elements could control their higher forms, and these mages were called deviants. Dwarves could only manipulate earth and fire, but they had a strong affinity with them. They could also shape and bend metal. Elves could only manipulate water, wind, and earth, but they had a higher affinity with these elements than humans. Some deviant elves could control plants, but no pure elf could master a higher form of any element. Humans had the ability to manipulate any basic element in their higher forms, but they had a weaker affinity with the elements than the other 2 races, creating a balance between them. Now let me tell you about the beast tamers. Virion was one of them, for instance. They were mages who could gradually inherit the ability of a mana beast. In the first phase, the acquire phase, the beast tamer could borrow the physical strength of his mana beast, becoming much stronger. But only in the second phase, the integrate phase, could the beast tamers truly utilize their beast ability and characteristics. There are other phases, but now let's focus on what was finally about to happen to Arthur. Virion ignited his mana core by putting a lot of mana into it, which caused a strong reaction in his young body and consequently an explosion, something that happens too often in his second life. Virion and Tesha ran quickly to help him, and the elder asked Arthur if he could finally tell him which mana beast he had inherited the will from. His disciple finally revealed that Sylvia was actually a dragon, surprising his master because such bond was exceptionally rare. Back in his room, Arthur asked the elder to keep his mana beast a secret. Virion agreed, and changing the subject said that Arthur could go home in 4 months, because an interracial tournament would take place in Xyrus and the portals that links that city to the other 2 kingdoms would be reopened. Art, as Tesha liked to call him, was feeling conflicted. He longed to go home, but he also enjoyed his training routine with Virion and his time with the little elf princess. They had grown much closer in these last years. After Virion left, he noticed something was off. The egg that Sylvia had given him began to crack, and a toothless and adorable creature emerged from it, looking at him with yellow eyes. It was a little dragon. Arthur was surprised as the little creature bit him in his arm, and soon he started hearing its voice in his head, calling him Mama. He told her to call him Papa instead, since he was a boy, and proceeded to name her Sylvie, which caused a surge of affection from the little dragon, who liked the name. After a while he concluded that the bite mark on his arm was a sign of their deep bond, and what allowed her to talk to him is his mind. Art wondered how rebellious he would look as an 8-year-old tattooed father and decided to sleep on it. When he woke up, he saw Tesha cuddling a helpless Sylvie, so he ignored both of them and fell asleep again. The next day Virion almost kicked the bucket when he learned that besides inheriting the will of a dragon, Arthur's new pet was also a little dragon. Virion explained that dragons usually only hatch their eggs in the presence of their kin, and the only plausible reason for Sylvie to be born was that when Arthur awakened his beast will, he somehow made the little dragon hatch. As they reached the final phase of his training, Virion decided to focus more on Arthur's mana core alongside his beast will. They had neglected his mana core training for years, and the best way to strengthen it was through combat, said the elder. Immediately Virion turned into a fearsome beast with yellow eyes and warned Arthur that he would sneak up on him, and when he did just that, Arthur couldn't even react in time. When he turned around, the elder was once again behind him, which made him immediately surrender, saying that his master was too fast in that form and it could easily traumatize him. Agreeing with everything his disciple said, Virion returned to normal, saying that although it made him extremely strong, this form, Shadow Panther, cost him a lot to maintain. Arthur added that he couldn't even notice his presence even when Virion told him where he would be. The following weeks passed with Arthur accessing the first stage of his dragon will. Besides training with Virion, he spent his time with Tesha, until the day of his departure came. Before leaving, he dedicated a few hours explaining to the young elf that they would see each other soon. Virion gave him an object that would allow him to be recognized as a guest of the Aerolith house and made a joke about Arthur bringing other princess home, annoying Tesha. Arthur started to say goodbye to her, saying that he hoped to see her stronger than him the next time they met, but she kept looking down, so he hugged her, saying that he would miss her and telling her to stay safe. "I am going to miss you, Art," was all she managed to say before he left. On the carriage, he met Ivysaur, and when he finally recognized him, he apologized for having bullied the young elf in the past. It didn't take long for him to arrive at the floating city of Xyrus, one of the main cities of Sapin, very lively and busy. As soon as he knocked on his parents' door, a series of memories flooded his mind. An old lady answered, and then Arthur introduced himself. Soon after, a little girl appeared behind the lady's skirt and stared at him with curious eyes. And then, he finally saw his mother. "Hello, Big Brother," was the first thing that Eleanor, his little sister, said to him. After the initial tsunami of emotions, his mother asked him if he was really cured now, and Arthur confirmed that his health was perfect. His father changed the subject and said that his mana core was in the dark orange stage and now he was an instructor of the Helstia auction house guards. Arthur said that in that case the beard was not the only thing that had grown on his father after all. Reynold was so shocked to hear that his son had reached the light red stage that he cursed, and Eleanor echoed him. He told the little girl not to use that word and then eagerly challenged his son to a spar in the garden. Before they could go, Vincent, Tabitha and their daughter arrived. He ran the Helstia auction house and she was his wife. Neither of them was a mage, nor was their daughter, Lilia. After everyone introduced themselves, they went to the garden where father and son would face each other again after years. At first Vincent found it hard to believe that Arthur at such a young age was already a mage at the light red stage, but that would soon change.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit, I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit, I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit, I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
The fight ended with Arthur's hand almost touching Reynolds' chin and the father's knee almost touching the son's ribs. Lightning was Arthur's most successful deviant affinity, but he still had a lot to learn. Ice was unstable and he hadn't even unlocked the other two yet, but that didn't stop him from bragging to his parents. The Helstias were very impressed with the boy even though the encounter had almost destroyed their garden. At the dinner table, the adults talked enthusiastically about the spectacular future that Arthur would have for awakening his mana core so early, and being a skilled mage, before even attending Xyrus' famous magic school. Vincent offered to sponsor Arthur's education, but his mother was reluctant to accept, because she felt that she would be taking advantage of them. Arthur interrupted everyone, saying he had different plans in mind and left the table claiming to be tired. Lilia followed him for a moment, and then invited him to go to the dining room of the house staff. There, she ate again, this time duck meat. The staff told him that young Lilia went there whenever she needed to de-stress. Her parents' greatest wish was for the little girl to become a mage, even though neither of them was one, which put a lot of pressure on her, making Arthur thoughtful. The next day started with Arthur bathing Sylvie, who as always didn't want to take a bath, and Eleanor shyly saying that Alice had told her to wake him up. They went to have breakfast and then went for a walk in the city. When they returned home, Arthur saw his father and Vincent with Cynthia Goodsky, the founder and director of Xyrus Academy. It was the most prestigious magic school in the continent, where the most brilliant mages in history had studied. The most influential families sent their children there, and the mage Cynthia Goodsky was the backbone of the institute. She explained that she rarely visited prospective students, but Vincent, a faithful ally of the school, had told her about a boy with extraordinary talent living in his house. So she came to assess him herself. She spotted Sylvie and wondered who her bond was. Arthur briefly said it was him, without elaborating. They reached the patio where Arthur's test would take place. After agreeing on the rules, the boy used earth magic to shatter the ground and flung a block at her. She blocked it with ease. Then he exploded towards her, but was thrown back before his fist could touch her face. Using wind magic, he balanced himself in the air. Cynthia conjured some tornadoes and was surprised when he managed to deflect them. After asking him to try to stay conscious if possible, she did the last test, using sound magic. When he didn't faint, the director of Cyrus Academy was quite impressed with the young mage and said that she was tempted to be his teacher herself. Everybody was confused, wondering since when Arthur was able to manipulate wind and earth magic, because they had only seen him use lightning. And it was at that moment that Arthur revealed be able to manipulate all the basic elements. The director admitted that he had great potential, maybe he would become the strongest in the future, and asked him what he wanted from her in a shielded bubble. Arthur said he wanted power and influence. He asked her to protect his family until he was strong enough to do so, and in return he would enroll in Cyrus Academy and consider her an ally in the future. He added that he would only join the academy in 3 years, because he had other plans before that. She tried to bargain with him, but eventually agreed to his terms and asked what he was going to do meanwhile. He said he had decided to become an adventurer. Later, when he told his parents the news, his mother was furious and opposed to her son becoming an adventurer after nearly dying just years ago. His father was more sympathetic to his desire, and Arthur tried to calm his mother by saying that he would not leave right away, but do some other things in Xyrus and spend more time with his family first. He said he wanted to experience the thrill that they had felt as adventurers. His father cautioned him that even though Arthur was powerful, he was not ready to go on such a journey alone. After some thought, the boy said he would go with someone stronger and reliable, a guardian. He told his mother that he would not be gone for 3 years straight, but that he would visit them several times a year. The next day at dinner, his father suggested inviting someone from Twins Horn to be Arthur's guardian, since they would return from an expedition soon. His mother liked this idea, and so did Arthur, who admired his father's former party members. After everyone left, Arthur went to talk to Vincent about something he needed. Vincent was startled by the strong aura that the young man radiated, almost like a king. Arthur thanked him for the tea and got to the point. He asked Vincent to get him some items, a hooded cloak for protection, a decent sword, and a mask that could change his voice. Vincent said the mask would be the only tricky item to retrieve, but he would manage to find it. Arthur said he had no money at the moment, but he had a way to repay the Helstias. Vincent said he didn't need to pay, because Reynolds' work and loyalty were enough payment. Arthur insisted and said he knew a way to awaken the mana core and that soon he would start to teach his sister how to awaken hers. He could do the same to Lilia, allowing her to become a mage and attend the Xyrus Academy in the future. Later in his room, with some yellow marks on his face, Arthur regretted that he could only use that power for a few moments and it was not enough for him to feel confident in protecting his family. Suddenly, he was overcome by the memories of the day when a bullet killed someone he loved in his past life. He swore that this time he would become strong enough, not to revenge, but to protect the people he loved. At this precise moment, Sylvie told him that his mother and sister had come back from their walk. When they all gathered in the living room, Arthur showed the little girls the breathing technique they should do to sense mana. They should breathe until they couldn't anymore and then open their mouth again, and try to breathe once more. Then they should exhale slowly in 15 small puffs. They should keep breathing this way until they saw lights floating around. His sister saw them briefly, but they vanished when she stopped breathing. Lilia couldn't see anything and was worried, but he said it was normal since she didn't come from a mage family. Next, Arthur tested a theory he had been working on in his mind. He infused mana into the girls' bodies, letting them see the mana in the air. He thought he could only do that because he was able to manipulate all the basic elements. He asked them to use their minds to gather the white lights, so they kept practicing, until he couldn't keep the technique anymore. He assured Lilia's mother that with his initial help, if the girl kept practicing, she would become a mage in a few years. She hugged him, while the girl and her father wept with joy. Arthur's new routine for the next weeks was to train by himself in the morning and help his sister and Lilia with their training in the afternoon. And after 2 months, the twins' horns arrived in Xyrus. Angela embraced him with open arms just like last time. Durden greeted him fondly, while Adam stayed away, acting tough. Helen said they were all happy to see him grow into such a handsome man. Jasmine instead hugged him and apologized for what happened. Adam's true feelings instead were obvious if you looked closely enough. Vincent took advantage of their presence to reinforce the security of the event that would take place later in the day. And after organizing the last details with Reynold, the group, dressing very elegantly, left for the 10th anniversary of the Helstia auction house. Many adventurers were excited by the opportunity to buy unique and rare items there. Arthur's father immediately started to organize the various security teams that would take care of the safety of the event, and Arthur with his mother entered the huge hall where the event would take place. The young mage showed his admiration for the grandeur of the building, and Tabitha thanked him for the compliment. Lilia invited Arthur to show him the other rooms of the building. The place really looked like a palace, having even a skillful barman. After a few more minutes, the event started, and an employee came to warn Tabitha that the VIP guests had just arrived. The first one was a hooded man carrying a scepter, and after him the royal family of Sapin arrived. The king was annoyed by having to share the VIP space with other people, but Vincent explained to him that they were his family and friends, and introduced them to the king. The Helstias and Lewins greeted the royal family, and His Majesty said that there was no need for so much formality, and told them to make themselves comfortable. Sylvie, who had been sleeping nearby, woke up and climbed on Arthur's shoulder. While the queen caressed her, Arthur explained that that little creature was his bond and that he could even talk to her telepathically. At that moment the hooded man, in an exalted manner, asked if Arthur had really established a contract of equals with a mana-beast, but he was interrupted by the king, who reminded him that he was on duty. The look they exchanged was anything but friendly. The event continued, and Arthur decided to drink some whiskey, obviously hidden from the adults. While reflecting that the queen was a conjurer, noticing her beauty, he found it curious that he did not feel attracted by the queen or other women his age. Maybe this was because they all had around his mother's age, but the same happened with younger girls. He did not consider them attractive for obvious reasons. Vincent approached and said that a sword would be auctioned next, and after the auctioneer spoke its various attributes and price, Arthur said he would prefer a less unique and simpler weapon. Vincent said he had found all the other items Arthur had asked him for, including the mask. The auction continued with other items being sold, such as mana cores, armors, and various weapons. The king himself bought an expensive mana core, but the beast was not guaranteed to be on it, so all of this was a gamble. Arthur noticed that it had been a while since he last saw Sylvie, and after searching her for a bit, he found her being trapped by the weird-looking mage he met earlier. Controlling himself not to do something stupid, he simply called the little dragon, and the mage said that a commoner like Arthur should not have such a special mana beast, and that Sylvie would soon be his. With a deadly look, Arthur asked him to repeat what he had just said, and his murderous intent was felt by everyone in the building, causing a commotion among security, king, and even the queen. Vincent almost fainted, and the mage fell to the ground. His father and others searched the building and found an intruder, who Arthur thanked internally for existing. And so the event proceeded, with a lion cub being auctioned. The auctioneer said that when adult, this creature could become even a Class B mana beast. It ended up being bought by the king for 1,000 gold coins. The house where Arthur lived when he was a little baby in this world was worth around 1 gold coin, to get you an idea. The creature would become bond of the king's son, Curtis. Taking advantage of the situation, the wizard approached the king and whispered in his ears. His Majesty approached Arthur and said something about him and his son training together in the future. the boy politely thanked him for the offer. After a moment, Arthur's father was summoned by the king, and the latter thanked him for his services. Reynolds said that such praise was not necessary, he was just doing his job. After a little conversation, the king got to the point, saying that the wizard Sebastian had been his royal guard for a long time, and that for his exemplary services, from time to time, the king gave him some special gift. Today, Sebastian had been interested in Arthur's bond, and by selling him Sylvie, Reynolds would be doing an important service for the kingdom. Reynolds very politely explained that this decision was Arthur's because he found Sylvie by himself. Then the king and the boy exchanged glances for a moment. His Majesty said he would not repeat himself, and offered a sword from his armory that the boy could freely choose in exchange for Sylvie. Keeping his composure, Arthur said that no sword could replace Sylvie and thanked the king for his offer. The wizard continually tried to interfere in the negotiation, but the king told him to be quiet. This time, His Majesty increased the offer, and offered the lion cub he had just bought for Sylvie. This time, Arthur was more direct, saying he did not want to sell, trade, or give Sylvie away. Taken aback by the answer, the king tried to impose his will, saying that he had already asked him a favor twice, and that his patience was about to end, he would ask him only one more time. It was at this moment that Arthur asked His Majesty an audacious question: how much gold did the king want to sell his children? And then, he continued explaining that pride apparently would not allow the king to accept a no as an answer, but His Majesty apparently did not know the gravity of his request. So the boy repeated his question to King Glader, how much money he wanted to sell his children, causing a commotion among all present, including a royal guard who tried to catch him by surprise, but Arthur dodged his blow and gave him a punch that knocked off his helmet. Trying to take advantage of the situation, the wizard prepared a spell to attack Arthur. But it was at that precise moment that time stopped for everyone, except Arthur and him. The wizard's magic disappeared, and Arthur explained that spells that need ambient mana would not work here. Yellow marks marked his face. Without much difficulty, Arthur broke the wizard's leg, which assumed a totally unnatural position. Sebastian screamed for help and said he was the personal conjurer of the king, and that Arthur could not do this to him. Arthur replied that it was time for Sebastian to know his place. When his technique ended, the boy fainted. The bloody scene terrified the adults and Lilia started screaming. When he woke up, he was in his room by himself. After a few moments, his mother came in with Sylvie. She told him that he had been unconscious for 8 hours, and that the king and queen apologized for the incident, and left soon after. His father spent the last hours meeting with a representative of the king, discussing how best to resolve the situation, and after assuring his mother that he was fine, Arthur went down and joined Reynolds. His father wanted a better compensation than just money, but that was all the king would give them. At least, both guards who attacked Arthur had been fired. The boy assured that he was in good health, and that nothing too serious had happened. He asked what had happened to the mage who broke his leg, and the king's representative said they believed that the mana used by the first guard had bounced off with the magic Sebastian was performing, and created an adverse reaction. The mage claimed that Arthur had actually attacked him, but no one believed it, and the situation was resolved with Arthur receiving a bag of gold coins as a reward for the incident. Back in his room, he began planning how his next years as an adventurer would be. The next day, in a tavern not far away, he and his family gathered with the members of the Twin Horns to decide who would be his guardian during his time as an adventurer. Adam said he was not the ideal person for that type of job, and Reynolds replied that he was actually thinking of asking Helen or Durden to be Arthur's guardian. Both said they would gladly do it, but Jasmine volunteered, surprising Angela, as the black-haired girl usually didn't like that kind of mission. Jasmine said she wouldn't have any problems doing it, since it was Arthur. After discussing among themselves, it was decided that she would indeed be Arthur's guardian. After stopping by the house briefly to meet with Vincent, the three of them left to go buy Arthur a sword. After he analyzed dozens of swords of various sizes, weights, shapes, and other weapons, such as nunchaku and bat-shaped shurikens, Sylvie surprised him by finding a black stick under a table that he actually thought was a sword. but despite his efforts, he couldn't unsheath it. Before giving up completely, he decided to try one last thing. Using his beast will, he managed to unsheath the sword, which revealed a beautiful translucent blue blade. After testing it for a while, he noticed the name of the sword, Dawn's Ballad. As he read the creator name, a reaction occurred in the sword, changing its size, and perfectly adapting to Arthur's body, both in weight and balance. After testing it a bit more, he realized it was perfect for him. To avoid suspicion, he decided to choose another sword as well, and pretend that Dawn's Ballad was just a stick, and took both swords home. It didn't take long for his birthday to arrive, and a beautiful banquet was prepared for the party at the Helstia's house. It was a very intimate birthday party, and at the table, the twin horns exchanged funny and embarrassing stories, especially about Adam, like that time he wet himself out of fear in a dungeon during a mission. After dinner, Arthur's parents gave him a glove with 3 healing gems as a gift. Everything was handmade by Reynold and Alice, and Arthur thanked them from the bottom of his heart. The Helstias gave him a pair of rings that would change color if his mana dropped below a certain point. The idea was to calm Alice, but Arthur knew that if his life was in danger, his parents would know immediately. His mother thanked the Helstias for the gift. As for the twin horns, they gave him a scroll that would allow him to send a message to anyone he wanted, no matter where that person was. He would also be able to receive a response, but it could only be used once. Later, lying in his bed, Arthur reflected on his new life and how grateful he was to have a family. The next day began with Arthur attempting once again to give a bath to Sylvie, who tried to cling to the floor using mana to avoid getting wet, but it was all in vain. After tidying everything up, he went downstairs to bid farewell to his family. Today, he and Jasmine would embark on their new adventures. After explaining to his little sister that he would return several times a year, and saying goodbye to his parents, he left the house and met Jasmine, who was waiting for him. Putting on his white mask, they set off towards the Adventurers Guild. The young adventuress told the attendant that she would like to sponsor Arthur for a rank examination, so she led them to the person in charge of that branch of the Adventurers Guild. Caspian Bladeheart mentioned that usually the test involved testing the mana core among other things, but since Jasmine Flamesworth was sponsoring him, he would skip that bureaucratic part, making Arthur notice that Jasmine's family was quite influential in the city. Caspian said that the only test the young mage would be required to take was the mock combat, and extending his hand, asked for his name. "Note," was Arthur's answer, and then they headed to the place where the test would occur. There, a lancer was facing an instructor who didn't seem very impressed with his performance. When the test ended, the instructor harshly criticized the lancer, who, crying, claimed to have finished all his training. In the end, he would be a Class D adventurer, just like that caped baldy guy from One Punch Man. Next, a girl walking up to the stage fell flat on her face, making everyone laugh, except for a blonde mage, who quickly noticed Arthur. The girl who had fallen was actually pretty talented, and after demonstrating her water magic skills she was classified as a Class C adventurer, which was an impressive feat for someone so young. After her, someone named Elijah Knight was placed in Class B without even taking the test, which piqued Arthur's curiosity. The blonde boy with green eyes was named Lucas Wykes, and he would be the next one to take the test. He arrogantly stepped onto the stage, asking why they didn't put him directly in Class A. His mana core was at the light orange stage, his specialty was fire magic, and he was only 11 years old. The test began with Lucas summoning a flame guardian, that quickly ran towards the instructor who trapped it with a stone prison. Lucas exploded the guardian, scattering several stone fragments in the air, while asking if the instructor was ready to be defeated. He followed up with another fire attack, but the instructor easily dodged it. Using earth magic, she conjured an earth arm and subdued the young mage, who tried to attack her by surprise, even though the test had clearly ended, and was stopped by another instructor. In the end, the spoiled young man's complaints, along with his performance in the examination, earned him the classification of a Class B adventurer, which he obviously hated. After Jasmine wished him good luck, Arthur made his way into the stage. As soon as Arthur unsheathed his sword, the instructor felt an enormous pressure emanating from him and all his senses screamed danger. Before the test began, Caspian interrupted them and asked the examiner to step down, because he wanted to personally test this candidate, something incredibly rare, that caught everyone's attention. Caspian was a Class AA adventurer and an extremely skilled mage. His bloodlust was almost palpable, and the pressure emanating from him sent a wave of adrenaline through Arthur's body, indicating that this wouldn't be just an ordinary mock combat. At first, all Arthur could do was dodge the sequence of strikes delivered by Caspian. The experienced adventurer praised him for his quick reflexes, and here Arthur attempted to go on the offensive for a moment, but was penalized with a cut on his face and an elbow to the ribs, forcing him to stay on the defensive, and on evading Caspian's sword strikes. Despite all his training, Arthur was not accustomed to this childlike body. Caspian decided to start using wind magic, and things became more complicated here, because now the young mage was forced to dodge the extremely fast sequence of wind bullets unleashed by Caspian. With great difficulty, Arthur finally got close to him wielding his flaming sword, and launched his own offensive. For a moment, the experienced mage questioned whether he would lose this fight and unleashed an explosion of wind, throwing Arthur away, even reaching the stands. Wind and flames filled the stage. When Arthur decided to use lightning to diminish the power gap between them, Caspian ended the test and apologized for having gone a little overboard in the mock combat. The veteran mage said that since he didn't use all his power, he assumed that Note wanted to receive a lower classification. He then left, stating that Arthur would initially be a Class B adventurer, causing a commotion in the stands. In a meeting among the examiners, Caspian reflected that Arthur was an incredible mage but was even better as a swordsman, and that his future would be interesting. After receiving his adventurer credentials from the polite attendant, Arthur and Jasmine headed to the beautiful Beast Glades and began their journey through the wilderness of that place. It didn't take long for Sylvie to decide to hunt some creatures, and Arthur decided that since there was no danger he would separate from her for a while. Besides, they could communicate at any time. In the following weeks, they ran through the forest, camped, exchanged life experiences, and trained. Jasmine came from a family of fire mages, but because she was a user of wind magic, she was looked down upon by them. Arthur found this situation ridiculous, because a hierarchy based on someone's affinity for a certain element was completely irrational. His reaction drew a rare laugh from the brunette.